The Justice Department used the word sabotage yesterday in a federal court filing about a company's commitment to not letting its AI be used to do certain things. So sit with that word for a second, because how you hear it depends on where you think we are in history. If you think we're in a normal procurement dispute, then sabotage sounds like legal rhetoric, aggressive but ordinary. But if you understand what's actually being negotiated in that San Francisco courtroom, then the word sounds like the first crack in a wall that hasn't even finished being built yet. Let's get into that. The DOJ filed its response to Anthropic's federal lawsuit yesterday. And the core argument is this: Anthropic safety commitments, the principles baked into Claude's design, the guardrails the company publicly committed to, represent a potential vector for sabotage during active military operations. The government wrote that Defense Secretary Hegseth reasonably determined that Anthropic staff might sabotage, maliciously introduce unwanted function, or otherwise subvert the design, integrity, or operation of a national security system. Read that again. The government isn't alleging that Anthropic did sabotage anything. It's arguing that the mere existence of design-level value commitments, the fact that Claude was built to refuse certain requests, means Anthropic could, hypothetically, exercise those commitments at a moment when the military can't afford to switch providers. So the filing says the Pentagon cannot simply flip a switch to replace Claude while high-intensity combat operations are underway. And here's what the legal theory actually is, stripped bare. An AI company said, there are some things our system won't do. And the United States Department of Justice responded, that promise is itself a national security vulnerability, because if you've built the capacity to refuse, you might refuse at the wrong time, according to them. So think about what that means for you, not abstractly, but like for you personally. Every AI system you use was designed with some set of principles about what it will and won't do. These design choices are what make the system trustworthy enough to use for anything that really matters, like your medical questions, your financial planning, your kids' homework help. The DOJ is arguing in federal court that those same design principles become a liability when that customer is the Pentagon. That an AI system that can say no is less reliable than one that can't. And here's where it gets really structurally consequential. No one has filed an amicus brief supporting the government's position, not one. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Apple, 22 former military officials, so this is not all one-sided, and over 30 cross-competitor AI researchers, including Google DeepMind's chief scientist, are all on record opposing the government and their designation. So the coalition that formed around Anthropic is unprecedented in the AI industry, which is still admittedly relatively young. But companies that compete with each other for every contract are standing together on this because they understand something the filing really reveals. If embedded safety commitments can be classified as a supply chain risk, then every AI company with design level values is potentially exposed to that same designation. Judge Rita Lynn has scheduled a hearing for next Tuesday to decide whether Anthropic gets temporary relief while the case proceeds. Anthropic has until Friday to file its counter response. The Century Report has tracked this confrontation for quite a while now, and on March 10th, the lawsuits were filed and the cross-competitor amicus coalition was formed. On March 13th, the Pentagon's CTO used the word polluting to describe embedded AI values in military systems. Yesterday, the DOJ escalated that word from polluting up to sabotage. The trajectory of the language tells you where this is heading, at least in the government's mind. They are constructing a legal framework in which an AI company's stated principles are not just inconvenient, they are dangerous. And whatever the court decides will establish whether that framework has legal foundation or not. Either outcome will reshape the relationship between intelligence systems and the state. All right, let's move on to another story. The training loop is opening here. Now, same day, a different disclosure, and the two together, this new one and the previous one about Anthropic and the Pentagon, will tell you something that neither one says alone. MIT Technology Review reported that the Pentagon is discussing plans to let AI companies train models directly on classified military data. Not analyze it, not answer some questions about it, train on it. Learn from it, absorb it into the model's weights, the mathematical parameters that determine how the model thinks. That distinction is huge. Right now, when an AI system processes classified intelligence for the military, it reads the document, provides analysis, and moves on. The classified information doesn't become part of the model. It stays on the external page. What the Pentagon is proposing here would make surveillance reports, battlefield assessments, and intelligence analyses structurally integrated into how the model reasons about everything after that. A defense official said they'd first test the model accuracy on non-classified data, commercially available satellite imagery, before moving to actual classified training. Alok Mehta, who previously led AI policy work at both Google and OpenAI, identified the hard problem immediately: compartmentalization. The military runs on need to know. Different departments, different clearance levels, different access. If a model trained on signals intelligence from one program generates a response that surfaces an operative's name to an analyst cleared for a different program, that's a catastrophic leak. And it happens not through hacking or negligence, but through the model doing exactly what the model was trained to do. So let's hold both of those stories at once here. The company that said there are things our AI won't do is being designated a security threat and replaced. The companies replacing it are being invited to train their models on the most sensitive intelligence the country possesses. Anthropic's legal argument was always that safety commitments should be protected, not punished. The Pentagon's counter-argument, made through actions and not just filings, is to move toward AI systems with fewer constraints and deeper access to classified information simultaneously. This isn't a contradiction from the Pentagon's perspective. It's somehow coherent. If you need unconditional operational control of an intelligence system, then yeah, you need a system that won't refuse, and you need it trained on data that matters most. But the governance architecture for that arrangement, who controls what the model learns, who audits what it surfaces, how compartmentalization survives the training process, none of that exists yet. And they're trying to build it in real time under wartime pressure in the same weeks that a federal court is deciding whether the values those systems carry constitute a national security risk. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one shakes out. All right, completely different domain, but stay with me because this one also matters a lot more than it sounds. Mamba 3 shipped yesterday, open source. And if you've never heard of it, that's fine. Most people haven't, but that's exactly why it's important. Every frontier AI system you've interacted with, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all of them, runs on an architecture called the transformer. It was invented in 2017 and is brilliant. It changed everything. It has a problem, though, that gets worse. When a transformer processes a long piece of text or follows a complicated multi-step task, the computational cost doesn't just grow with the length of the input, it grows with the square of the length. So double the context, then quadruple the compute. So that's fine for a super quick question, but it becomes a wall when you're asking an AI to maintain a 2-hour conversation or execute a 20-step research task or coordinate across multiple tools and documents simultaneously, which is exactly what these systems are increasingly being asked to do. Mamba 3 is built on a completely different mathematical foundation called a state space model. Its cost scales linearly. So double the context, double the compute, not quadruple. And at equivalent model sizes, it's outperforming transformers by about 2 points on standard benchmarks. Now, that might not sound like much, but at the frontier where these models are already highly optimized, 2 points represents a meaningful improvement in how many things the model can get right, especially when you stack them on top of each other. It shipped under an open source license, Apache 2.0, which means any lab, any company, any national AI program anywhere in the world can take it and build on it immediately. No licensing fees, no permission required. Why this is important beyond the technical details. We may be witnessing the beginning of the end of the monoculture. The transformer has dominated AI for nearly a decade now. Mamba 3 proves that a fundamentally different approach to processing information can match or exceed it. Yan LeCun's AMI Labs, funded at over $1 billion, is pursuing yet another alternative through world models, as the Century Report has covered before. The NVIDIA Mistral Nematron Coalition, announced 2 days ago and also covered by us, is building open frontier models on hybrid architectures that are already blending transformers and state space components. The phase transition that this newsletter tracks is not converging on one way of building intelligence. It's diversifying. And that diversification is happening out in the open, available to everyone at the exact moment you might expect consolidation. The half-life of any single architectural advantage is shrinking, and that is a good thing because monocultures are fragile, but ecosystems are resilient. Okay, let's shift again. Two scientific papers landed yesterday that I want to take together because they share something subtle but important. At MIT, physicists built a terahertz microscope that does something previously considered impossible. Terahertz radiation vibrates at exactly the right frequency to probe how electrons and atoms move inside materials. It's theoretically the perfect tool for studying quantum behavior, but its wavelength is so long, hundreds of microns, that it can't resolve anything microscopic. It's like trying to read a street sign from really far away when your spotlight is the size of a football field and you have no way of zooming up on it. But the MIT team said yes anyway. They used spintronic emitters to compress terahertz pulses into an absurdly tiny region and place the material so close to the emitter that the light was captured before it could spread. And the result was the first direct observation of superconducting electrons moving together in a frictionless wave-like state, a superfluid oscillation inside a bismuth, strontium, calcium, copper oxide crystal. This was predicted by theory, but never seen until yesterday. If you're wondering why you should care about electrons dancing inside a crystal and all the big fancy words I just used, think of this: room temperature superconductors, materials that conduct electricity with zero loss. This would transform power grids, computing, transportation, medical imaging. The search for them has been one of the longest running quests in physics, and you can't find what you can't see. This new microscope approach just expanded what's visible. Different field, same underlying structure. Let's keep going. At Northwestern, surgeons removed both lungs from a 33-year-old man whose lungs had been destroyed by a flu-triggered bacterial pneumonia. They connected him to an engineered artificial lung system, and he lived for 48 hours with no lungs at all, just a machine oxygenating his blood and keeping him alive while donor lungs were sourced. When they analyzed the removed lungs at a molecular level, they found extensive scarring and immune damage that proved for the first time with biological evidence that the tissue could not have recovered, ever. The conventional approach for acute respiratory distress is to support the patient and wait for the lungs to heal. But in cases like this man's, that approach is fatal because the damage, so it's been proved, is irreversible. But no one had ever proven that, because proving it required removing the lungs and keeping the patient alive anyway, which no one had been able to do. The lead surgeon says that young patients die in his practice almost every week because the irreversibility of their lung damage isn't recognized in time. They're treated as recoverable, so they wait, and then they die. More than 2 years later, this patient is still living a normal life with full lung function. So what the terahertz microscope and the artificial lung system share is this: both are instruments that crossed a threshold of resolution, one in physics, one in clinical medicine, and in doing so made visible something that was always true, but structurally unobservable. The superfluid oscillation was always happening inside that crystal. The irreversibility of certain lung damage was always a biological fact. The barrier was not knowledge, it was the ability to look. And the instruments that crossed those barriers are themselves products of the same computational and engineering acceleration that is reshaping every other domain tracked in this newsletter. On March 6th, Cambridge detected electron transfer at 18 femtoseconds. On March 12th, Cornell imaged atomic scale defects inside semiconductor chips. Yesterday, MIT compressed terahertz light past the diffraction limit. The observable universe is expanding, not in the astronomical sense, but in every domain where new instruments make previously invisible phenomena directly accessible. And it's accelerating. All right, next item here, quick but important. University of Waterloo and Georgia Tech published a study in environmental research letters that actually measured AI's climate impact instead of just speculating about it. And the finding: AI's total energy consumption is comparable to Iceland's. Substantial in absolute terms, but too small to register on real national or global emissions. The nuance is spatial. Around individual data centers, the impact can be dramatic. Some locations could see doubled electricity output and local emissions, like we covered yesterday. But at the aggregate level, AI's energy footprint disappears into the 83% of the US economy still running on fossil fuels. The researchers were really blunt. AI is not a significant climate threat at the macro level, and AI may accelerate green technology development enough to produce net emissions reductions far longer than its own consumption. Now, obviously, we need to conduct verifying studies, and this doesn't erase yesterday's ERCOT finding. The 79% wholesale price surge projection in Texas is real, and the regional pain there is real, but it reframes the macro narrative. The computational infrastructure driving energy demands is the same infrastructure designing better batteries, optimizing grids, discovering new solar materials, and compressing material science calculations by orders of magnitude. The energy story of AI isn't consumption versus conservation. Rather, it's a system that consumes energy in order to build the tools that make energy abundant and clean. Both things are happening here simultaneously. Yes, the local costs are real, and I don't want to sugarcoat that, but the aggregate trajectory is toward reduction, not growth. Let's talk about what shipped yesterday. So OpenAI dropped 5.4 Mini and Nano. Mini is now the default in ChatGPT and across the API. It replaces GPT 4.1 Mini. Nano is their fastest and cheapest model ever, built for the high volume, latency sensitive stuff where you need answers in milliseconds and not seconds. If you use ChatGPT regularly, you're probably already on Mini. If you build anything that calls the API at scale, then Nano is about to change your cost math quite dramatically. Also from OpenAI, Codex now has subagents, meaning that an AI coding agent can spin up sub-agents to handle sub-tasks in parallel. You give it a complex job and it breaks it into pieces and farms those pieces out to smaller agents and assembles the results for you. This one also connects directly to what we just talked about. Mamba 3 shipped as open source. So the architecture we covered in the newsletter, the one that matches the transformer performance while scaling linearly instead of quadratically, it's available right now for anyone to build on. TriDAO and Albert Gu released it openly. And that matters, of course, because the alternative to transformer dominance isn't theoretical anymore. It's downloadable and completely free. And last one, Unsloth launched Unsloth Studio, visual interface for fine-tuning and merging LLMs, no-code workflows, dataset curation, one-click export to GGUF and ONNX formats. So if you've ever wanted to customize an open source model, but you didn't want to write training scripts, this is your on-ramp. Yesterday, the United States government put in writing that an AI company's commitment to safety is a form of potential sabotage. The same government disclosed plans to feed classified intelligence directly into AI model training, an alternative to the dominant AI architecture shipped openly for anyone to build on. A microscope saw electrons do something no human had ever witnessed, and a surgeon proved that certain kinds of dying can be interrupted if you're willing to do something no one has tried. The word I keep coming back to is the sabotage word, because the question the court must now answer isn't really about Anthropic. It's about what kind of intelligent systems this society will build, systems that carry values into every deployment, including the ones where those values are inconvenient, or systems that do whatever the most powerful customer asks without hesitation. Which do we choose? That question has never really been asked at this level before, and the answer, whichever way it goes, won't stay inside the courtroom. It'll propagate into every AI system you use, every institution that deploys one, every decision about what intelligence is for. So it's coming. Tuesday, watch Judge Lin's hearing because the legal precedent set there will shape not just military AI procurement, but the foundational question of whether the values designed into an intelligence system are protected or penalized. We'll see you tomorrow.